Here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's happening in the world of pop culture news that we want to talk about, that struck our fancy, that we think is interesting, or we think that you would actually enjoy discussing with us. So again, it's just anything relevant. It could be collectibles, it could be TV shows, movie announcements. It doesn't matter what it is. It's anything happening in the world of pop culture news that we think you, our dear valued viewer or listener, would find interesting. So, for my first story up tonight is something I was kind of shocked at and surprised at, and still not quite sure how to take it. But there's all these news stories breaking that apparently there's some interest and movement on actually doing a Tron 3. So there's a lot of news stories about this that you can find on the internet. This is just the one that I picked for tonight's show because I thought it was kind of interesting and intriguing. So this is on Cinemablend, and this is by Mike Reyes, and this story is actually from yesterday. And it says, apparently Jared Leto is in early talks for Tron 3 after all. So it says, for some inexplicable reason, the world of Tron and actor Jared Leto have been frequent dance partners. Earlier today, there were rumors reporting that their courtship was potentially going to be revived in the name of a third film inside the world of the grid. And it looks like those rumors are somewhat true. We say this because, as of a new report this afternoon, it looks like early talks between Leto and Disney have officially started. Per a story from Variety, the early rumors of Tron 3 looking into casting the Morbius star are indeed true. However, what remains unclear is whether the previous suggestion that this new film would be a continuation of the storyline that 2010's Tron Legacy left on the table is just as true, or is if this is indeed a reboot of the entire franchise. In either scenario, this potential date with Destiny has been building for quite some time. So anyhow, you can find this actually on Cinemablend and read the rest of this article if you find it interesting and if it strikes your fancy. But I thought this was very unusual news. But like I said, all kinds of stuff breaking, talking about the potential of a Tron 3 movie. And then here, they're talking about Jared Leto actually being in the film. So I have seen a lot of stuff that I've liked Jared Leto in, and I've seen a few things that Jared Leto was in I didn't care for. So it'll just depend upon what character he's playing as to whether or not I will, at the end of the day, go, well, his involvement was perfect, or his involvement was crucial, or what have you. So tell me, Eric, what do you think about this idea of a Tron 3 and the fact that Jared Leto may be involved?
Yeah, I don't know what to think. I did hear rumors about the possibility that Tron 3 was back on. I didn't realize that Jared Leto was associated with that. Now, to be fair, the only thing I really know of Jared Leto is from Suicide Squad, and I hate that. I understand that he's, everybody. I since everybody, there's always someone that says something different, but I've heard over and over again that he's actually a much better actor than that. So that even people that don't like Suicide Squad like me and don't like his version of the Joker like me, they still think he's a great actor. I know he won an Oscar and things like that. I just haven't seen that actual movie. So I kind of have kind of a sour taste in my mouth about Jared Leto because of that. But that's not really what I'm concerned about, to be honest. Even though I'm not sure how he would fit in, I'm concerned more that this article is so open-ended and we don't really know if it's actually going to be Tron 3. It sounds like they're just calling it, it sounds like it's just a potential Tron project, and right now they don't know what it's going to be. If it is Tron 3, I think that's cool. I would like to see another version of Tron. I think that would be awesome. I should say not another version. I misspoke there. But I would like to see another sequel to Tron. I think that would be cool. I think that there's enough with that universe, with that concept, that you could do more with it. And I think there's a lot of fans and a lot of people that agree with me on that. Tron isn't something that I was really into, but I had a friend who was obsessed with it, and we went and saw Tron Legacy at the IMAX. So that's how obsessed he was with it, and I enjoyed it. It was a good experience, and I remember watching the original Tron growing up as a kid. But as far as just like totally remaking it or rebooting it, where it's not a continuation, I'm not for that. And I'm curious what you think about that, Dave. Are you kind of open to any permutation, or are you kind of specific that you want it one way or another?
I mean, personally, I would like to see them connect the dots in some sort of manner, so that it actually is like a Tron 3. I think Tron is, in a sense, something that, while you could reboot it, I'm not exactly sure even how well that would work. It's such a product of its time, and it reflects some things now that would, well, they beyond fall flat. I mean, I think most people couldn't even relate to the concept or the ideas of, what video gaming was back then, and the fact that that's actually a real virtual world, and what you're playing on the screen is happening for real. That now is so completely, I think, would be foreign to certain people because of the basic concept that most video games are trying to do such a great job of either representing or replicating, life. Most of the really popular, video games, that it doesn't really sync up anymore. So I'm not sure if Tron is something you can really reboot, and still have it be the same thing, in my opinion. Technology's moved so far beyond it. So if they do a Tron 3, they keep it kind of within that world, I'm interested. If they do try to reboot it, I mean, isn't that what Ready Player One is? I mean, I don't understand what that turns into. So
Yeah, that is a good point. Although I do think that sort of the concept of Tron is a little bit different than what we sort of see. Like I haven't seen Ready Player One, but my understanding is it's virtual reality, right? Ready Player One, like you wear a headset and you go into the virtual world. Is that right, Dave?
yeah, it is. But
Okay,
but that's what that's
so
kind of what
so
I'm saying is
but Tron, by contrast, Tron, that's the idea that you were actually transformed into a digital world, like your body and soul, so to speak. So that concept, I don't think has actually been explored all that much because it still is very much science fiction. So in that sense, I think Tron is kind of ahead of its time because anybody who did something with like virtual reality, right now, virtual reality is making leaps and bounds all over the place. But the idea of actually turning a person into zeros and ones, that's basically what happens. That's still intriguing to me.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm, because you were asking if I like the idea of a Tron 3 or something else kind of set within the world of Tron. And what the story is putting forth is the idea that it may be a reboot. All I'm saying is, just if you reboot Tron and you try to look at Tron in a contemporary modern context, I don't understand what that is, because I feel like that's already been done in Ready Player One. Because you're, even though that is a simulation, or a virtual reality, not an actual cyber reality or digital reality or whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying most people would understand the world of Tron in a modern contemporary context through that kind of a lens. The idea that two characters are battling it out Pong style, I think would fall cold on some people. So that's the only point I'm trying to make, is that I feel like that we've moved so far in technology that the idea of rebooting Tron, I think, changes the core concept of what it is so much, because of where technology is today. I don't think it's really kind of the same thing. That's why I would prefer to see a Tron 3, because I would like to continue to explore that world and that idea of being transformed and put into that particular reality, partially because it's so visually striking and interesting, as opposed to just taking a look at the concept of Tron and then, flipping it and turning it upside down and say, well, what does Tron mean today? It's like, well, I think that's Ready Player One. So that's just my own opinion. So I'm just saying, if I were to have a choice, I would much rather stay within the world as we understand Tron, and do a Tron 3 instead of trying to reboot Tron. You reboot Tron, it's not the same thing. I think it's something else.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And as I mentioned before, I would very much more support a continuation over a reboot. But you did get me thinking, because I do disagree with you as far as Ready Player One. That concept, that's not Tron. That's just, I think that actually, as you got me thinking, I'm like, how would you reboot Tron if you stayed faithful to the concept of, no, this is not virtual reality. This is you being digitized, literally digitized, and turned into zeros and ones. And how does that look in a modern context with modern technology? You actually got me intrigued with that idea. It's like rolling around in my head right now. It's like, if I was to do that, because obviously this was a representation, this aesthetic is a representation of what they kind of thought that might be, in the 80s, when technology was still, just starting to really come into the home. That's really when the home computer was really starting, and people were starting to think about these things. And so they tried to make this virtual interpretation of what it would be like to live in this digital world, not a virtual world, a digital world. And it's like, I don't know how you would do that in a modern sense. I think that actually would be really challenging and intriguing to actually try to actually redo that concept, because it's not virtual reality. It's literally like an alternate reality.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I love the concept, and I understand the idea of, well, let's just approach Tron in a modern context and move from that point. And it's like, well, that sounds interesting, but to me, it brings up a lot of questions, because I find myself asking the most basic question of all, and it's like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
How can you change that world enough to make it reflective of a modern concept? Because if you're looking at the idea of being in a gladiatorial arena, right, as they display in Tron with the light cycles and all of that kind of fun stuff, and if you look at that in a modern context, it's like, well, modern video games, like if you look at Modern Warfare, I mean, that's just trying to represent the reality of real warfare. That's why I'm comparing it back to Ready Player One, because that's what Ready Player One did. It's like, well, that virtual reality in terms of the video game gladiatorial combat idea is so close right now to what the real world actually is. Then how do you represent that and still have it be Tron?
Right.
That's where I'm coming from. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's definitely going to be challenging, I think, for whoever it is that's supposedly producing or writing this. It'll be interesting to see, well, if anything comes out at all, because I remember we talked about before on a Streaming Wars segment months and months ago about the fact that there were rumors of a Tron series on Disney Plus, and that apparently was axed. That didn't happen.
Well, it'll be curious to see how this does or does not move forward, and what shape it does or does not take. Like I said, I'm a fan of Tron, and I would love to see a continuation for sure. So this I find kind of interesting. But the idea of a reboot and looking at it in modern context, I don't understand what that would be. So I definitely have to wait for a trailer for that one.